Hi, my name is Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my painting from the Cliffs of Tyler. Tyler Park is a beautiful state park in Pennsylvania, and many people enjoy hiking the slopes, riding into waters on kayaks and canoes, and exploring all there is to see. My husband and I took a walk there one fall day and really enjoyed the beauty of nature. I took some photographs, and that's what I'm bringing you today in my painting. In part one, I sketched the painting out. I did a lot of masking, and then I started right in on the blues of the creek. I did all the work on the slope with directional brush strokes, and I started out the tree leaves wet on wet. I hope you enjoy the video and give it a thumbs up. Now let's paint. We love to hike at beautiful Tyler State Park in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and some years ago I took a photograph during one of our hikes. We were very high up on the slopes and cliffs of Tyler Park, and we were looking down at the beautiful Neshaminy Creek below. The photograph was something I thought was just gorgeous, but I was a little afraid to try to paint it, so it has stayed in my records for a long time. The perspective is an aerial one, where we are way up high looking down below to see the river way down below. I decided to give it a shot, and I'm giving myself a sketch to start. We're looking down through trees, and it's fall. Many of the leaves were a beautiful shade of gold and yellow, and the stream below showed up quite blue, so the colors were lovely. There was also some very strong sunlight on the picture. I decided the best way to preserve these strong lights was to use some masking fluid on my basic sketch of the trees. I've painted in the sunlit side of all the trees, and if I've done too much, I can certainly paint over it later. And now I'm painting in where the sun was hitting the bank and the edge of the slope very strongly. Because I'm working with blue for the water and yellow for the leaves, I decided I should do some masking in the sky where the leaves overlay all the colors in the background. The colors were quite dramatically dark against the light yellow leaves. Some of the branches were also very white. And the very top, at the top, the sky showed pale. It took a lot of practice for me to make masking fluid lines so thin. But using a thin brush and just the very tip seems to work best. And here comes the many, many, many yellow leaves. I have completed my masking, and now I'm experimenting with different colors to try to match the shade of blue that was so beautiful in the photograph. There were also some interesting reflections on the blue. This whole painting was quite a challenge for me. It required a lot of planning ahead of time and a lot of thought as to how to apply the paint to show the reflections and the colors that I wanted to show. In this case, I'm working wet on the blue paint with some greens. This is showing some foliage from further away trees. And the closer trees are darker. I'm taking each section bit by bit so that I can work wet on wet. And I'm using some gray to make the reflection from the distant shore that is shining onto the water. As I painted the gray in, it faded and I darkened it. And I may well have to darken it again, but this is laying it out at this point, and I could certainly get darker if needed. So I'm moving across where the blue is showing, and then the trees hang down above it. So I'm marking out where the trees start to show their foliage and where the blue of the water is. Again, we're looking down off of a cliff at a wide area of the creek, of Neshaminy Creek. Over toward the left, we have a lot stronger dark reflections on the water, so the whole thing became much more dramatically and deeply colored. And that took a number of layers, believe me. This was a complicated painting, and it took me quite a while to figure out exactly how I wanted to try to convey it, or even if I could do so successfully. But I do enjoy a challenge, and this one was a challenge. I am working fairly wet on wet still at this point, so my colors will blur as I paint them in. And here comes the first of the yellow for the beautiful sunlit trees. Painting green on top, but letting the yellow show through to convey the sunlight. Next session, everything was dry, and I begin on the forest floor. This was pretty much leaf-covered dirt with some lovely strong shadows. So I'm coming in with a very choppy stroke to try to convey the textures of the leaves and the debris on the forest slope floor. I'm also showing some directional lines because the whole thing is going down a hill, and I'm trying to lead the eye to imagine that there is a slope or a hillside. So I'm painting along the natural lines of the slope as they would go off the cliff's edge. Well, actually, it wasn't a huge drop. You could get down to the stream from here, but you were climbing. It was quite steep. So I begin the sunlit areas with warm colors, and then I'm putting an overlay of indigo and Payne's gray mixed together on top of those warm areas where the tree shadows are falling. And even in the shadows, I am trying to use the same kind of stroke or brush work to convey the slope and the directionality of the slope. I don't think I have ever done anything quite with this kind of stroke work before, or brush work, to show that it was going off the edge. So it was part of the challenge, and it was interesting. Now I'm beginning the leaves on the top. I'm spraying everything down so it's good and wet. And then coming in with my golden yellow colors. I used that paper to block off the water, which was blue, because I did not want the water to be green. I wanted to keep those beautiful strong blues, because that was an important part of the composition. I also used my hand to block the water direction spray. I'm not painting the leaves in a solid yellow. I am painting them in a spotty brush stroke type of manner to try to convey the lightness of the leaves themselves. Letting a little blue sky show through. Even splattering some on with my brush, throwing the paint on at the top. And I'm throwing a little bit of magenta on, figuring that the magenta will mix with the yellow and make some nice orange colors. And then some vermilion. Now everywhere the masking is placed is going to remain pure white, so I can change things around. Now this part's a little tricky. There was a lot of green in the picture as well. And since I don't want the green to all run together with the oranges and the yellows, the spray bottle that I used applied spray drops of water. It was not a solid wet surface. So if I apply it in a dotty manner, it won't all run together. Yet I am working very wet on wet here. It's just not a solid wet surface, but rather a sprayed wet surface. And I continue to build this up with layers of orange, with layers of yellow-green, with layers of olive-green. And then some Hooker's Green Dark. And I'm trying to show the direction of the branches along with the leaves that are coming off of the branches. And then some indigo for some strong darks, where it seems indicated from the photograph. Working this wet, it will have to dry completely before I can come back and tackle the next steps. I hope you enjoyed From the Cliffs of Tyler, and that you'll subscribe and ring the bell to get notices of future videos I post. In the description below, you'll find links to the materials I like to use, to my Facebook, my art page, my blog, and to art products I make. Comments are a big help too. I'll see you next painting.